Welcome to today's Silicon Bites, and it's taken me a while to script this one because it's quite extensive. I've been trying to look at all of the evidence that suggests the US has been captured by lies and is now being dismantled in Russia's favour, and indeed is acting in a foreign policy sense in Russia's favour and against the interests of Ukraine. I've tried to group this together so that the evidence for this becomes irrefutable. Before we jump in, thank you so much to everyone who supports the channel, everyone who has bought me a coffee or become a patron, and especially everyone who's been supporting the current campaign we've got running, and that is to get drones via a charity based in Lviv, a fantastic group of people. There are links in the description below, and tomorrow I will be publishing an interview I made on the ground in Lviv with the team that creates these drones. If you can help, please do. The US is captured by lies, some of which have their origins in Moscow. The main institutions of power are also captured by disingenuous grifters and traitors, as well as those who have subordinated their morality and political values to gain proximity to power. These people want to realign the US with its historic enemy Russia and loosen bonds with allies such as Ukraine, France, Britain, and Canada. Many of the Kremlin-seeded lies do not have any political aims or objectives in themselves, but are intended to flood the zone with conflict and division, so that the real strategic maneuvers are lost to sight or ignored by the media and analysts, such as the sinister and outrageous piece of political theatre in the Oval Office, which was designed to distract from what Trump really intended to do all along: cut military aid to Ukraine, to force it to capitulate to Russia as the fastest route to what he sees as peace. And it's not even peace, it's profit that he is pursuing. Getting Ukraine to capitulate to Russia is the fastest route to profit for Donald Trump. This is the real game, not the puppet show that we and the media are endlessly drawn to, car crash TV, clickbait for social media. No, the real game is now afoot, and the masks are slipping away. And the participants are not playing card games. As I've been suggesting in recent videos, the result of Trump getting his minerals deal announced in a speech to Congress will not be to unlock further support for Ukraine or to create a security architecture, but quite the reverse. Trump cannot imagine a Ukrainian victory for many reasons, but needs the war to end to start generating what he sees as profits as well as political dividends. He needs Ukraine to stop fighting to realize these ambitions and to fulfill a broader strategy, which is to peel Russia away from China and form a grand alliance of conservative, Christian, white empires, the US and Russia. Yes, there are definitely racial undertones to all this against the atheist, communist, non-white Chinese. I'll do a separate episode on this, why this strategy is totally misguided, and there are, of course, far better ways to prevent Chinese hegemony. But in his mind, the fastest way to achieve peace and the capitulation to Moscow's terms is for Ukraine to suffer a loss and for them to literally be incapable of fighting on. You end the war not with the victory of the victim, but with the triumph of the aggressor. This is the plan, quite literally. The dim, oh so very dim Trump Jr. and Orban basically described this plan last year. There are videos of them doing so, but most of us chose optimism over despair. We really should have paid more attention and started to prepare accordingly. Of course, the plan that Trump has latched onto demonstrates that he neither understands Ukraine nor Russia. His logic is flawed and dangerous, as well as being repugnant and immoral. But this act to stop aid, then stop intelligence sharing, as he has done this week, are moves designed to destroy Ukrainian resistance and resilience. They will not succeed, but are extremely dangerous, and they will result in a lot of preventable death. Allies that think there are any vestiges of the transatlantic relationship left, or that Trump can be persuaded to back Ukraine, are seriously deluded. Anyone who thinks this is all because of the disastrous Oval Office meeting is dangerously naive and vulnerable to Russian psychological operations. Anyone who's called for Zelenskyy to go has fallen into that psyop and is now a conduit for Russian hybrid warfare, even if they are ostensibly pro-Ukrainian. Trump is evil, his actions are evil, and he is only just getting started. He has also made many others complicit in his evil, including Kellogg and Rubio, amongst others. I repeat, Trump is not a reliable ally against Russia or China for that matter. The UK needs to step up as a leader in Europe for Ukraine's defence and the collective security of the continent. At least those parts of the continent that don't want to fall within the jurisdiction of predatory authoritarian regimes. Hungary and Slovakia note patience with appeasers of Putin is transitioning from being a persistent annoyance to becoming a risk to the collective security of European democracy. There will come a point where you are fed to the crocodile to buy Europe more time to rearm and protect those countries that genuinely want to remain free. Among the fire hose of news and statements, a Trump spokesperson explained that Trump is focused on peace. Right now, that focus entails disarming the victim to the benefit of Russia and to ensure the attacks of the aggressor are more successful. It is almost immaterial whether Trump is a Russian agent or not. A far better term to use is a Russian asset. An asset is not an agent of, say, the GRU. An asset is someone who makes statements and takes actions that benefit the Kremlin over and above the discernible benefits to his own constituents and country. In that definition, Trump is certainly an asset of Russia and has behaved consistently to reinforce that impression. Trump is not just transactional. He's not just doing business, but his mindset is extremely hierarchical. He sees life as a vertical of power, privilege, and wealth. This is like the Russian system, but in that system, power is everything. Prestige and wealth are simply things that accrue to the powerful. In Trump's world, wealth and privilege can still elevate you in status up that vertical of power. But in other respects, the vision of how the world works is frighteningly similar to that of Vladimir Putin. Throughout his life, Trump has treated those with less power as inferiors, something to control or crush or just ignore. He doesn't see Ukraine as an ally or Zelenskyy as a peer. He sees it as an inconvenience. To him, it's just another shithole country, as he calls African and South African nations, lacking strategic or inherent value. In his vision, they are not sovereign and cannot be seen as peers of the US or Russia. It's a concept from the deep, dark recesses of history, and of course, the realist school of geopolitics exemplified by Mearsheimer. Ukraine can be seen only as standing in the way of better relations with real countries like Russia and the US. That's why he views Putin as his equal and Zelenskyy as his inferior. In the view of Jason J. Smart, Trump's push to end the Ukraine war isn't about peace, it's about getting rid of a headache, extracting wealth, which he'll spin as recouping Biden's so-called waste, and boosting his chances at a Nobel Peace Prize, well, in his own head at least. Something he seems to covet as the ultimate symbol of status and validation. Beyond that, Ukraine's future means nothing to him. If Europe wants to foot the bill for its security, well, fine. But if Ukraine is no longer his problem, the details don't matter to him. Those who talk about a strategic shift in US foreign policy are missing the point, explains Jason. Trump's White House doesn't care about most of the world. His entire career has followed a simple rule. Those who are strong survive, and those who are weak get stomped on. If a country can't prove its existence benefits the US or Trump himself, Trump personally, then it has no value to Trump. Being a democracy or a long-standing ally mean absolutely nothing to him. The lesson is Europe must prepare for its own security. Don't count on America. This is what he wanted to do and was going to do anyway, because this is what Putin wants. If there's no pushback domestically, nothing will change. It has nothing to do with Zelenskyy or so-called peace negotiations, which are just a pretext to get the US deeper in bed with Russia. Without security guarantees, any minerals deal is just surrender by another name. It's just distraction, smoke and mirrors, and Zelenskyy and Ukrainians understand that. They know Putin and they know Russia. They know any agreement will be broken. It means torture, rape, kidnapping, and murder. Trump and Musk probably know that too, but they just don't care. Here are the 10 signs that the US is captured by lies and is now working towards a Russian victory, whatever that entails, and why, if we in Europe want to save Ukraine and save ourselves, we cannot count on the US or even include it in any of our strategies and plans. Number one, pausing of military aid and intelligence data. Trump has done it, the thing that was always a risk based on his rhetoric during the election and while he was in office the first time. He has ordered the complete halt of military aid to Ukraine. This was announced by Trump on Monday, 3rd of March, and it includes arms in transit that were previously approved by the Biden administration. Due to activities and pushback in the American courts, it means that some of these weapons in transition may now be on the move again, but we're waiting for clarification. But certainly stopping them was the intention of the Trump administration. There will, of course, be no new aid from the US. Those holding out for this to be reversed are seriously delusional and are no longer helping Ukraine's cause to perpetuate such false hopes. The onus now is on Europe to fill the gap. I can see why some might continue to lobby because the alternative is shocking and can lead to despair. But America has flipped. It is transitioning to become a strategic ally of Russia, an enabler of one of the world's vilest authoritarian regimes that started the largest genocidal war since World War II. It was announced that the US would halt intelligence sharing also with Kyiv, threatening Ukraine's ability to strike Russian targets. These are from undisclosed sources and reported in the Financial Times, but of course more and more information has come out about this. This apparent move follows Washington's decision to freeze all military aid supplies to Ukraine. Intelligence data does not simply come from the US, but a lot is sourced, analysed, processed via Britain as well. This makes that order very complicated, as Britain is a key ally of Ukraine. There were conflicting claims as to whether the aid freeze also concerned intelligence sharing, a crucial capability that allows Ukraine to strike Russian targets and track military movement. The British tabloid, the Daily Mail, previously reported the US had banned the UK from sharing Washington-obtained intelligence with Kyiv. Intelligence gathered by the UK and not explicitly paid for by the US may still get through, but the restrictions will nevertheless hamper time-sensitive intelligence crucial for conducting precision strikes against movable Russian targets. Sky News reported that the restrictions are selective and are aimed at Ukraine's ability to launch strikes. In this sense, they align with another of Moscow's demands, that Ukraine be denied the capability to fire Western-made munitions and long-range missiles into Russia. Along with the freezing of US aid, Ukraine funding is also included the suspension of support for critical energy infrastructure in Ukraine. Trump is doing what Russian missiles and bombs failed to do here over consecutive winters. Trump is helping Putin to fulfill one of the key strategic objectives that they have failed to implement in 3 years of war. He is removing the protections so that Russia can strike energy infrastructure, and he is removing the funding to make that energy infrastructure resilient and to help with reconstruction of it. Here's number 2 point, replacing Zelenskyy. Representative Tuberville in the US has said Putin and Trump will decide the future of Ukraine, not Zelenskyy. I'm sorry, but did this man have wet dreams about a new American empire? No longer dispensing lessons in democracy, whether they are welcome or not, such as Vance did at Munich. No, we are now getting lectures on tyranny and colonialism from US politicians, which they hypocritically label as freedom of speech. Let that sink in. An American democratically elected politician announced that the fate of Ukraine would not be decided by its people or its democratically mandated leaders, but by the dictator that is trying to erase them. and by an American political cult of personality that is falling over itself to hand Ukraine over to that same tyrant. At the same time, Zelenskyy enjoys a 73% approval rating in some polls, 67 in others, which is so much higher than that enjoyed by President Trump in the US. Elon Musk added to the fray and said, as distasteful as it is, Zelenskyy should be offered some kind of amnesty in a neutral country in exchange for a peaceful transition back to democracy in Ukraine. No, this is what you do with dictators if you don't have the balls to execute them. Trump, Musk, and his acolytes are now saying this about democratically elected leaders. No one anywhere in position of power are now safe if they have been democratically elected and if they do not kowtow to the Elon Musk Trump regime. The campaign to remove Zelenskyy has been gleefully jumped on by many in the Russian disinformation bubble, as well as those on its fringes. But this has been a crucial war aim of Russia from the start. If we acquiesce to it, we are fulfilling the Kremlin's #1 objective. Also beware, because various media and political assets of the Kremlin have been activated over the last couple of days to drive towards this objective. The intensity is only set to grow as the Kremlin smells blood in the water. Number 3, realignment with Russia through deals. Another sign that the US is aligning with Russia and away from the democratic world is the talk of doing trade deals with Putin and lifting sanctions. Russia is interested in getting US sanctions against oligarchs lifted and resuming energy exports, says one of Zelenskyy's advisors, Vladislav Vlasyuk. Ukrainian President's Commissioner for Sanctions claimed that lifting sanctions was one of Moscow's priorities during the US-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia earlier this month. Our understanding is that they are most concerned about two things. The first thing is those oligarchs who are under EU, US and UK sanctions, because this is a real problem for them. The second thing is what prevents Russia from making money. That is energy sanctions, he said. Of course, the most effective sanctions against oil are long-range Ukrainian drones, and we can probably expect pressure to come from the US to halt those strikes soon, just as they seem to have cut off targeting data for HIMARS and ATACMS units on the 5th of March. At the technical level, Kiev continues to cooperate with Washington on further sanctions against Russia. In a seemingly contradictory statement, Vlasyuk said the US has a good appetite for continuing work on sanctions against Russia's Shadow Fleet, a group of aging tankers routinely used for sanctions evasion, as well as everything related to critical components. Possibly because this is oil going to China, they may still push through with this. It's not clear for now. This may just be more smoke and mirrors to distract us. But beware, because statements made by Trump and associates during the campaign and since, those statements may have indicated some preferential treatment of Ukraine over Russia, but all of those statements have been betrayed. We must look cynically at any statement of positive intent towards Ukraine by the US as a smokescreen, cover provided by both useful idiots and disingenuous morons alike. That is just delaying the moment when the US implements evil acts to weaken Ukraine and by extension its allies in Europe. They are stepping into the gap vacated by the US and therefore will also become a target of Trump's evil decisions. There are only two credible reasons why Vance and Trump sought to humiliate Zelenskyy in the Oval Office and force capitulation on him. One is, of course, the obvious one now, that he's colluding with Russia. Or two, because the minerals deal changed, possibly to the point where Trump could no longer benefit to the same degree, if at all personally. Trump is the worst sort of war profiteer, and let's face it, would collude with Russia, not only because of compromat, but also for profit and privilege. The next point, Kremlin talking points. There are no end of figures spouting Russian propaganda as part of a holistic worldview, an Orwellian anti-reality, such as Tulsi Gabbard, Trump, Vance, Musk, Joe Rogan, and Tucker Carlson. And then there are people making statements that contradict their previous support for Ukraine and perhaps former rationality on foreign policy questions. Now they collude to punish the victim and exonerate the aggressor, seemingly for some theoretical reasons that in fact make no rational sense. In fact, they've become corrupted through proximity to power and their desire to maintain their place in that vile glow of the orange sun king of Mar-a-Lago. They have rapidly moved to framing the narrative that it's Putin that wants peace and it's Zelenskyy that's a warmonger. Zelenskyy that's an impediment to peace. You see this narrative flooding the zone on Newsmax, Fox, and even through supine Republicans that are prepared to parrot these easily falsifiable propagandistic lies. Don't be fooled. This is not at all in response to the car crash press event in the Oval Office. This is a trap that has been set to spring, and the minerals deal was the bait laid for Zelenskyy. Lure him to Washington, pull back from any security guarantees at the last minute, provoke Zelenskyy, and sit back. What's tragic is that Zelenskyy sensed betrayal, possibly even realized this was a trap, but felt compelled to walk into it, a kind of sacrificial lamb for his nation. Ukraine is used to betrayal over the centuries, as well as in the Chicken Kyiv speech in 1991 and then again during the Budapest memorandums. Even Victoria Nuland lacked belief in Ukrainian agency and freedom when she urged the Maidan protesters to make accommodations with the aspiring tyrant Yanukovych. Ukrainians are well used to betrayal and they have a keen sense for it. This may be why Zelenskyy went on the defensive rather than riding out the abuse in the Oval Office. While this trap would have been sprung sooner or later, Zelenskyy would have been provoked one way or another. The propagandistic narrative about Zelenskyy, the warmonger, is not being cobbled together only now as if by accident. They have been a long time in preparation, fermented indeed by Kremlin propagandists over many years, getting ready for the great betrayal of Ukraine. The next point, Kash Patel's corruption witch hunt. The US FBI director has called on Congress to investigate Ukraine aid transparency, in other words, launch a witch hunt with the aim of discrediting the aid provided to Ukraine, further with the objective of discrediting Zelenskyy and Ukraine. When the immune system is gone, they will attack the body. This starts as a witch hunt against opponents in the US, and especially anyone in the GOP that turns against Trump. This kind of witch hunt is very Putinistic in character. Kash Patel, the newly appointed director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, called on US Congress to investigate how aid money sent to Ukraine has been used. I've asked Congress to investigate where this money has gone. The American people are owed that answer because it's our money, it's our taxpayer dollars, Patel said. But opinion polls show Americans significantly overestimate the proportion of US federal budget that is spent on foreign aid, believing it to be around 25%, when in fact it is only around 1% in 2023. That amounts to just 0.25% of GDP, but even this is being hacked away ruthlessly. No surprise, Patel also criticized the scale of US aid to Ukraine. The issue is not about US sending $1 billion, but rather the amount sent to one country is 100 times that billion. This, of course, is distracting. It is, of course, as well, a ludicrous exaggeration. Patel questioned President Volodymyr Zelensky's credibility. He referenced a missile incident in Poland, suggesting it was a made-up story. But Poland has scrambled jets several times over the past year, as missiles sent to Western Ukraine have violated Polish airspace. He concluded with further skeptical statements and additional calls to investigate Ukrainian funds. We just can't have full faith and trust in giving a leader 100 billion and then having him say, I'm not telling you where the money was spent, Patel concluded. Firstly, most money does not go directly to Ukraine, but stays in the US and is invested in US industry and companies. Secondly, this is the most monitored and tracked war in history. The audit trails for weapons and kit provided are infinitely better than in, say, Iraq and Afghanistan. And thirdly, the Ukrainians have not withheld any information to my knowledge. Numerous US government organizations have been keeping up with oversight and transparency measures of aid to Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. US aid has also included support for judicial reforms and anti-corruption initiatives and promoting transparency and accountability in governance. In effect, the US administration is removing support for transparency, removing support for probity and reform, not the other way around. Patel is considered a Trump loyalist, and his views align with the current administration's escalating criticisms of Zelensky's government, including Trump's recent false claims that the US has sent $350 billion in assistance to Ukraine. Patel apparently received $25,000 in 2024 from a film company run by a pro-Kremlin filmmaker, Igor Lopatonok, the Washington Press reported in February this year. The payment comes after Patel participated in a documentary. About Trump that aired on TCN, the online network of right-wing commentator Tucker Carlson. This really is a spider's web of lies and grift. The next topic, intelligence and military vulnerabilities. Here are a few more reasons why the US is actively siding with Russia against Ukraine, and the trajectory of this is bad and getting worse every day. It's been widely reported that the US is withdrawing intelligence data and support for Ukraine. This will result in numerous avoidable Ukrainian civilian and military deaths, but it will not cause Russia to ease up on its aggression. Based on past Russian behavior, it will only provoke and encourage more. There are fears Starlink is next to go, pushing Europeans to scrabble for alternative sources of data and intelligence to supply Ukraine. Another fear is that all advanced US defense equipment could soon be deprived of software patches and support, spare parts and maintenance. The worst case scenario is a mass bricking of US equipment to Ukraine, certainly, but by extension perhaps to allies that are supporting Ukraine. This has already triggered a wave of distrust in the US as a military supplier. The long-term consequences will be that allies think twice about sourcing equipment from the US. This could even extend to the next generation of nuclear deterrent. And today, the American aerospace company Maxar Technologies has disabled Ukraine's access to its satellite images. Expect more bad news to come. Stocks of European defense companies are skyrocketing just as Trump destroys the US industry. Next, and we're almost there, we have international institutional assaults and NATO. Trump has exhibited extreme predatory transactional psychopathy in his first weeks as president. Threats against Mexico, Greenland, Canada have all been issues. And various imperialistic statements have been made about carving up the Arctic. The attitude to Ukraine has been one of the worst examples of imperial arrogance from a bullying power. The US is becoming very like the very worst caricatures of it as depicted in 1960s Soviet propaganda. But it's not only Republicans and MAGA cultists that repeat the lie that having American contractors in Ukraine will be an inviolable security buffer, ensuring no more attacks from Russia. This line has been repeated by Trump and Rubio, as well as Nigel Farage in the UK. It does not stand up to any cogent historical analysis and flies in the face of Russian actions in 2008, 2014 and 2022. No amount of US investment on the ground will deter Putin from further aggression. Those people, those contractors can be whisked out quickly, and the attempt to extract profits from the territories of Ukraine during a temporary truce can be accelerated because they know more violence is coming. But it may be even worse than this. What if Trump makes a deal for those workers to stay on the territory occupied by Russia? That would represent commercial activities continuing that guarantees Trump's investments, whether Ukraine stands or falls, whether Russia wins or not. Who is naive enough to think that he won't cut such a deal with the Kremlin? War or peace? Russia or Ukraine, profits will find a way. Next, we have dismantling American hard and soft power, as well as administrative resilience. In a word, Trump is dismantling American soft and hard power in real time. Never mind 4 years, in 4 months' time, there will be little left intact of America's former reputation or strength. The cancelling of US aid has created an influence vacuum that the Chinese are already capitalising on. Why have the Chinese looked on while Russia embarrasses itself on the battlefield over 3 years in Ukraine? Well, it's because Putin promised Xi that he could dismantle American power in the world and make Taiwan vulnerable to invasion, and so it has come to pass. Trump is launching trade wars that are destroying relationships that have taken more than a century to build, trust and common cause that he is frittering away before our very eyes. Within the US, he has embarked upon an assault on professionalism and evidence-based governance. See the underreported Friday massacre, a military purge that will hollow out the capabilities of the US military, ensuring that only Trump loyalists remain. Believe me, these are not the smartest people, the most innovative or educated, nor the most honest or energetic. The US will rapidly come to resemble the Soviet Union in its dying days. And we have 2 left. Number 9, US beneficiaries and agents law. An early casualty was the anti-corruption and anti-oligarch legislation. In early February, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that the US Department of Justice was shutting down a program that sanctioned Kremlin-linked oligarchs and which was launched in 2022. The Biden-era task force seized assets worth about $700 million as of February 2024. The implications go far beyond corruption, though. Drones and missiles used by Russia in its daily attacks on Ukraine contain tens of thousands of Western components, according to Ukrainian officials. Moscow continues to avoid sanctions using sanctions evasion networks and shell companies, and is also aided in sanctions evasion through its allies, including China, Iran, and North Korea. Removal of the task forces and legislation that Trump has implemented will enable a huge flow of components and machine tools to the Russian war machine. Trump is in effect helping to rebuild the Russian war economy, and he is likely to make more steps towards this, right up to dismantling the sanctions regime against Russia in the coming days and weeks. And the last point, number 10, Cyber Command standing down. Hegseth has ordered the suspension of the Pentagon's offensive cyber operations against Russia by US Cyber Command, rolling back some efforts to contend with a key adversary, even as national security experts call for the US to expand those capabilities. Hegseth's decision does not affect cyber operations conducted by other agencies, including the CIA and the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, but the Trump administration also has rolled back other efforts of the FBI and other agencies related to countering digital and cyber threats. Republican lawmakers and national security experts have all called for greater offensive posture, not less. So why are they not now doing anything to counter a move that significantly weakens the US and by extension its allies in the face of escalating Russian cyber threats? Hegseth's directive arrived before Friday's confrontation in the Oval Office. Cyber warfare is cheaper than traditional military force, can be carried out covertly, and doesn't carry the same risk of escalation or retaliation, making it an increasingly popular tool for nations that want to contend with the US. And it's a core offensive capability of the Russian military against the West within its hybrid warfare initiatives. Cyber espionage can allow adversaries to steal competitive secrets from American companies, obtain sensitive intelligence, or disrupt supply chains or systems that manage dams, water plants, traffic systems, private companies, governments, and hospitals. The implications are terrifying. Meanwhile, Attorney General Pam Bondi also disbanded an FBI task force focused on foreign influence campaigns like those Russia used to target the US elections in the last year. And more than a dozen people who worked on election security at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency were put on leave. This directly reduces democratic resilience. These actions are leaving the US vulnerable despite years of evidence that Russia is committed to continuing and expanding its cyber efforts, including the disruption of democratic processes. Instead of confronting this threat, the Trump administration has actively taken steps to make it easier for the Kremlin to interfere and unleashed malicious cyber campaigns. We are, to conclude, seeing a coup unfold, and it's not in slow motion. It took years for General Secretary of the Communist Party, Comrade Stalin, to emerge from the grey shadows to launch the Red Terror. It took longer for Hitler to dismantle the vestiges of administrative and judicial resistance to his tyranny. Trump is achieving the same things in weeks, with barely a whimper, with no pushback. Where are all the checks and balances, the famed resilience of US constitutional and federal law? Anyone in power or positions of responsibility in the US now must ask themselves the question, what would I do if I was in Berlin in the 1930s during the Nazis' rise to power? What would I do during the Great Terror in 1930s Moscow? Because there is no room for neutrality. It's not enough to stand back while Trump burns down the house and point your finger at him and laugh and blame him for everything. Because this is your house he's burning down. Now you can either choose to resist or collude. There is no middle ground. Are you part of the resistance or colluding in evil acts? Because, believe me, Trump wants to make you all complicit in his evil.